AITA for walking out after my family tried to claim my husband's insurance money? I'm Nancy, 39, and 2 weeks after I became Daniel's widow, I was sitting on my living room floor sorting sympathy cards while my 8-year-old daughter, Lily, lined up her dad's old baseball caps by color because she said it made the room feel less empty. There were cards around my knees, a half-empty box of tissues beside me, and 3 grocery store gift cards from people who barely knew us tucked inside envelopes with shaky handwriting. I wish I could say my parents were there helping us breathe through it. Instead, they were busy protecting my younger sister Heather's engagement weekend from anything as inconvenient as my husband's death. That sounds cruel when I say it directly. For years I would have softened it. I would have said my parents were overwhelmed, or that Heather needed them, or that the timing was impossible. I had 1,000 little ways to make their choices sound less ugly, mostly because admitting the truth felt humiliating. Nobody wants to say, my parents will show up for ribbon samples faster than they'll show up for my grief. But that was my family long before Daniel died. I was the dependable daughter. Heather was the celebrated one. I don't mean she never had problems or that my parents never loved me. They loved me in the way some people love a sturdy table. They leaned on me, stacked things on me, expected me not to wobble, and praised me for holding weight they never should have put there. When Lily turned 7, my mother, Carol, forgot her birthday. She called 2 days later and said, "Tell my sweet girl grandma had the craziest week." That same month, she remembered the exact shade of ivory ribbon Heather wanted wrapped around engagement favor boxes that didn't even exist yet. My father, Richard, used to say, "Nancy, you're stronger than everyone else," like it was a compliment. What he meant was, need less. Heather borrowed my clothes, my time, my patience, and more than once my money. Repayment was always treated like an optional gesture. If I reminded her, she would sigh and say, "I thought sisters didn't keep score." If I didn't remind her, my parents praised me for being generous. Daniel noticed all of it early. One night years ago, after I transferred money to Heather because she had miscalculated a deposit for something, Daniel stood at the kitchen sink rinsing Lily's little plastic bowl and said, "They don't ask you for help, Nance. They assign you responsibility." I was defensive because the truth hit a little too close to home. "They're still my parents," I said. He turned off the water and looked at me with that calm face of his, the one that made me want to argue and cry at the same time. That's what they count on. I hated when he was right about my family. Not because he was smug. Daniel was never smug. I hated it because I had spent my whole life translating their selfishness into something I could survive. When he said it plainly, the translation stopped working. Still, I kept the peace. I absorbed fights. I paid for calm. I answered calls I didn't want to answer and attended dinners where my own needs were treated like background noise. I told myself that family might be unfair during ordinary life, but they would show up when something truly awful happened. Then Daniel died. I won't go into every medical detail. It was sudden, it was terrifying, and it turned my world into a series of forms with boxes I didn't know how to check. One minute I was worrying about whether we had enough milk for Lily's cereal. The next, I was standing in a hospital hallway with my phone at 4% battery, while a nurse asked me who she could call for me. I called my parents. My mother answered with noise behind her. Laughter, dishes, people talking over each other. For one disoriented second, I thought I had called the wrong number. "Mom," I said, and my voice sounded like it belonged to somebody else. "Daniel's gone." The background noise faded. I heard a door close. "Oh, honey," she said. "Oh my God." I remember gripping the edge of a plastic chair and waiting for the words that should have come next. "We're coming. Where are you? Is Lily with you? Breathe, baby." Instead, my mother lowered her voice and said, "We're in the middle of Heather's engagement weekend." I didn't understand the sentence at first. "What?" "Everyone is already here," she said, as if she were explaining traffic. "The brunch is tomorrow morning. People flew in. Heather is already so emotional. My husband just died." I know that. I am so sorry. But we can't just walk out of this without turning everything into a scene." My father got on the phone after that. His voice was quieter, reasonable in the way it always was when he was about to help my mother hurt me. "Nancy, stay calm," he said. "Don't make today harder for the whole family." The whole family. I was sitting under fluorescent lights with Daniel's hospital bracelet still looped around my fingers, and somehow I was the one at risk of being inconsiderate. Lily was with a neighbor. She didn't know yet. I remember thinking I needed my mother to come because I didn't know how to say the words to my child. I needed my father to drive because my hands were shaking. I needed somebody older than me to step in for 10 minutes and make one decision. Nobody came. Heather texted me less than 20 minutes later. I'm sorry, but please don't tell people here yet. I know this is awful, but this is my engagement weekend and I can't have everyone looking at me like I'm supposed to cancel. We can talk after brunch. I stared at that message until the screen went dim. I didn't reply. I took a screenshot without even deciding to. My thumb just did it like some part of me knew I would need proof one day that I wasn't exaggerating. The next days became a blur of tasks. The world didn't explode. It became paperwork. The funeral home gave me an invoice with neat line items for the service, flowers, printed programs, and transportation. I remember being offended by how orderly it looked. Daniel had been a person who sang off-key while making pancakes. Now he was a balance due. I spoke to Lily's school counselor. I wrote down words like age-appropriate grief support on a yellow legal pad while my daughter sat at the kitchen table drawing Daniel with wings, then crossing the wings out because, as she whispered, Daddy wasn't a bird. Neighbors brought casseroles. One woman from down the street left paper plates and napkins in a grocery bag on the porch because she said washing dishes was cruel when people were sad. Daniel's old friend came over and fixed the loose hinge on the back door because he needed something to do with his hands. People I barely knew brought food. My parents sent heart emojis. They didn't come to the service. On the morning of the funeral, I stood outside the funeral home holding Lily's hand. She was wearing small black shoes we had bought in a rush. They were a little too stiff and she kept shifting from foot to foot. Daniel's photo was on an easel inside, the one where he was wearing a faded gray shirt and smiling at Lily behind the camera. My phone buzzed. It was a text from my mother. We love you, but today is already in motion for Heather. Please don't make everyone choose. We'll honor Daniel privately soon. I stared at the words until they stopped looking like English. Lily tugged my sleeve. Is Grandma coming? I put my phone face down against my coat and said, Not today, baby. She nodded like she understood, but her face changed. Children know when adults fail them. They just don't always have the language for it. At the service, I kept looking toward the doors. I hated myself for it. Every time they opened, my chest jumped. Every time it was somebody else, I felt stupid all over again. My parents didn't walk in late. Heather didn't send flowers. Richard didn't call afterward and say he was sorry he made the wrong choice. The day after the burial, my mother texted, Hope you and Lily are resting. Love you both. I threw up in the bathroom after reading it. Not because it was cruel exactly, but because it was so polished. So clean. Like she could wipe away absence with one gentle sentence. 2 days later, Heather posted engagement photos. The first picture was her laughing with Colin, her fiancé, under a balloon arch. My mother had commented, My beautiful girl. The happiest chapter begins. So proud. Heather's caption said, The happiest chapter begins. I had buried my husband on Tuesday. She posted that on Thursday. I didn't comment. I didn't call. I didn't make a scene. I was too tired to be dramatic. Grief isn't always loud. Sometimes it's standing in the grocery store realizing you no longer have to buy the coffee creamer your husband liked, and then leaving without anything because you can't remember why you came. Extended relatives started reaching out later with strange messages. Aunt Paula called and said, Honey, I wish I'd known earlier. Carol said you wanted privacy and that the service was very small. I stood at the kitchen counter with Lily's lunchbox open in front of me, staring at a half-made peanut butter sandwich. She said what? She said you didn't want people overwhelmed with details. Aunt Paula hesitated. I would have come. That was the first time I realized my parents had not just abandoned me. They had managed the story. Carol told people I wanted privacy. Richard told one cousin I was not ready for family attention. Heather told someone else Daniel's service was immediate family only, which would have been funny if it hadn't been so sick, considering my actual immediate family had stayed at her brunch. I still didn't confront them. I had Lily to protect. I had mail to open. I had Daniel's clothes hanging in our closet like he might need them again. I had sympathy cards stacked in uneven piles and a memory box with his keychain, baseball caps, and one handwritten note he once left on the fridge that said, "Pick up batteries. Tell Nancy she's pretty." Then someone mentioned life insurance. I don't know who told my mother. I suspect Aunt Paula said something innocent in the family group chat about hoping Daniel had planned well because Nancy and Lily needed support. Aunt Paula meant it kindly. She has always been one of those relatives who thinks out loud in texts. After that, my mother's tone changed. The first message came late at night. Money can divide families if people get selfish. I know Daniel would want everyone to stay close. I read it twice, then put the phone down. The next morning, Richard texted, "When things settle, we should talk about whether Daniel left anything set aside for family obligations. No pressure. Just practical. No pressure." Heather followed a few hours later. "I know you're grieving, but please remember everyone is dealing with this in their own way. Hoarding resources won't help you heal." Hoarding resources. They hadn't asked whether Lily was sleeping. They hadn't asked whether I was eating. They hadn't asked whether I needed help with the funeral invoice, whether I had clean laundry, whether I needed someone to sit with my child while I cried in the shower. But they were worried about resources. 12 days after Daniel's funeral, my parents came to my house. I hadn't invited them. The doorbell camera caught my mother holding a store-bought casserole still in its plastic container. The orange discount sticker not fully peeled off. My father stood behind her with a folder tucked under one arm. I almost didn't open the door. Then Lily walked into the room wearing one of Daniel's old baseball caps backward and asked, "Is that Grandma?" I opened it because some old stupid part of me still hoped maybe they had come to be sorry. My mother stepped in and hugged me with one arm because the casserole was in the other. "Oh honey," she said. "You look exhausted." I wanted to say, "My husband died." Instead, I took the casserole and set it on the kitchen counter. My father cleared his throat. "We thought we should have a practical conversation." Lily was in the hallway, close enough to hear. I said, "Not in front of Lily." Carol glanced toward her and smiled in that bright grandma way she could turn on like a lamp. "Sweetheart, why don't you go draw something?" Lily didn't move. "I'm okay," I told her. "Go to your room for a little bit." She went, but the hallway in our house carries sound. I know because I had heard Daniel singing from every corner of it. Richard opened the folder and pulled out a printed spreadsheet. A spreadsheet. It had color-coded categories. The title at the top was Family Support Considerations. Under it were lines like temporary family support, grandparent travel, Heather wedding stability, shared emotional loss, and household adjustments. For a few seconds I couldn't speak. It was one of those moments where the brain refuses to accept what the eyes are seeing. "What is this?" I asked. Carol sat on my couch like she had been invited for tea. "We're not asking for ourselves. You brought me a list." "We brought a starting point," Richard said. "No one is saying you owe us everything. We just need a fair conversation." "Fair to who?" Carol pressed her lips together. "Nancy, Daniel married into all of us in a way. He was part of this family." The room went so still I could hear the refrigerator hum. "He was part of this family when you skipped his funeral?" My father looked down. My mother's face tightened. "That is unfair. Heather's engagement weekend was already in motion. We were trying to keep one tragedy from swallowing everything." "One tragedy?" I repeated. "My husband dying was a tragedy. Heather having fewer brunch compliments would have been an inconvenience." Carol's eyes flashed. "Don't punish your sister because she had something happy happen." I laughed once. It sounded wrong coming out of me. "You are sitting in my living room with a spreadsheet for my dead husband's insurance, and you think I'm punishing Heather?" Richard lifted his hand like he was calming a nervous dog. "Nancy, your mother is emotional. Try to hear what she means." "I hear exactly what she means." Carol leaned forward. "Daniel would have wanted the whole family cared for." That sentence changed everything. Because Lily was in the hallway. I saw her before my parents did. She was standing near the corner, holding Daniel's old keychain in both hands. It had a little bottle opener shaped like a baseball bat. She loved it because she said it was dad-sized. Her face was pale. After my parents left, She came into the living room and asked in a tiny voice, "Mom, did Daddy say Grandma should have his money?" Something hot and clean rose in me. "No, baby," I said, kneeling in front of her. "Daddy was very clear." "How do you know?" I pulled her into my arms and looked over her shoulder at the spreadsheet still lying on the coffee table. "I know." But the truth was I needed to know more. Daniel had always been organized in a way that annoyed me when he was alive and saved me after he died. He had a fireproof document box in the closet with labeled folders: taxes, insurance, home, Lily's school, medical, passwords. I had avoided opening most of it because seeing his handwriting hurt. That night, after Lily fell asleep with one of his caps on her pillow, I took the box to the dining table. There was a folder labeled, "Important Nancy." Inside were beneficiary forms, copies of policy information with account numbers, and a notarized statement. Under those was a sealed envelope with my name on it and in Daniel's handwriting, "For you and Lily only." My hand started shaking before I even opened it. Inside was a letter and a USB drive with a small piece of tape on it that read, "Voice memo play when ready." I wasn't ready. I played it anyway. Daniel's voice filled the kitchen from my laptop speakers, warm and familiar and impossible. "Hey, Nance." I covered my mouth so I wouldn't wake Lily. "If you're hearing this, I hate that I'm not there to say it to your face. I hope this is just me being overly cautious and you're mad at me for making a dramatic little file like a weirdo." He gave a soft laugh and I broke completely. I cried with my forehead on the table, one hand over the laptop like I could hold him there. The memo went on. "You and Lily come first. That is not negotiable. The insurance is for the house for Lily. For whatever stability looks like when I can't help provide it myself. Your parents do not get a vote. Heather does not get a vote. Anyone who tries to make you feel guilty about that is proving why I wrote this down." Paused it. I could barely breathe. When I pressed play again, his voice was gentler. "I know you love them. I know you want them to be better than they are. But do not let anyone turn your kindness into a bill. Nancy and Lily are my family. No one else comes before them." Near the end, he mentioned something I had forgotten. "Your mom said something once when you were in the bathroom after that dinner at their house. She said, 'Nancy will do the right thing and help her family if you're not here.' I laughed it off then, but it stayed with me. So I'm saying this clearly now. My wishes are you and Lily. No exceptions." I sat in the kitchen until almost 2 in the morning, replaying parts of it, not because I needed permission but because I needed his voice to push back against theirs. The next day I called Mr. Alden, the attorney Daniel had used when we updated some paperwork after Lily was born. He wasn't dramatic. He didn't gasp or call my parents monsters. He asked for documents, told me what to black out, and scheduled a call. When I explained the spreadsheet, he was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "They can ask for anything. That does not make it a claim. So they have no right to the insurance?" "No." "Daniel's separate accounts?" "No. Not based on what you're describing and the beneficiary forms you sent." "Lily's protected fund?" "Absolutely not." I cried again, but it was different. Less like drowning. More like letting go of a breath I had been holding for years. Mr. Alden's advice was simple. Do not debate grief with people using it as a collection notice. Keep records. Do not send angry messages. If I needed to correct lies, correct them with a timeline, not a rant. Move asset-related communication through his office. Change passwords. Update emergency contacts where appropriate. Secure original documents. Your emotions are valid, he said. But in writing, be boring. So I became boring. I scanned the spreadsheet. I saved the doorbell camera clip from the day my parents came over. I downloaded Heather's text asking me not to tell people Daniel had died during her engagement weekend. I saved my mother's funeral morning message. I saved Richard's text about family obligations. I gathered the funeral home invoice with every painful line item. I kept the school counselor note recommending Lily continue grief sessions. I pulled bank transfer records showing the times I had helped Heather before, including one transfer my mother had told me not to mention because Heather was sensitive about money. I found a voicemail from Carol 2 days after my parents brought the spreadsheet. I hadn't listened to it because I was done hearing her voice. When I finally played it, she sounded irritated, like I was the one being rude. Nancy, this silence is not healthy. We all lost Daniel. You are not the only person grieving. Money can make people forget where they came from, and I will not let that happen to my family. Call me before your father starts thinking you're shutting us out for good. We all lost Daniel. They didn't attend his funeral. Then came the text that made the whole thing snap into place. Heather had accidentally sent me a screenshot. I think she meant to send it to Carol. It was a cropped piece of her conversation with my mother, probably because they were arguing about what to say to me. At the top was a message from Carol sent before Daniel's funeral. Let Nancy handle the service. We'll talk about the money once she's less raw. For now, keep the weekend clean. Heather sent, sorry, wrong thread, immediately after. Then, don't start drama over that. Mom was just worried. Wrong thread. Right truth. I saved it before she could delete anything. Until that moment, part of me had still believed they were selfish in a messy, impulsive way. That message showed strategy. Let Nancy handle the service. Talk money after. Keep the weekend clean. They had made a plan around my husband's death, and the plan was not to support me. It was to wait until grief made me easier to pressure. I forwarded everything to Mr. Alden. His response was short. Keep all of this. Do not reply directly about assets. I will prepare a formal letter if contact continues. Contact continued. Carol shifted to the family group chat. It was called Family Altogether, which became funnier and sadder the more I stared at it. She wrote long messages about unity. She said I had shut out the family completely. She said grief had made me cold. She said Daniel would not want money to come between blood. Heather added, she won't even discuss what Daniel left behind. I'm sorry, but it feels like she's punishing us for not being able to drop everything. A few relatives sent hearts. A few sent question marks. Aunt Paula messaged me privately. Nancy, is this true? Your mom is saying you won't let them see Lily, and that you're refusing to talk about Daniel's wishes. I stared at that message with my hands shaking. That was the sentence that made them stop. Not because I was calm, because I was done being the only person paying the cost of their version. I replied to Aunt Paula privately, not tonight, but soon. Carol then organized what she called a small family gathering. She said everyone needed closure after Heather's engagement celebration had been overshadowed by tension. It was at my aunt's house, not my parents', which was probably supposed to make it feel neutral. I didn't want to go. Mr. Alden told me I didn't have to. But I also knew Carol had been feeding the family a story for weeks, and if I stayed away, she would keep filling the empty chair with whatever version of me helped her most. So I went. I brought a folder, my laptop, and the USB Daniel had left. I did not bring Lily as a prop. She was supposed to stay with Daniel's friend's wife that afternoon, but the woman got sick that morning and canceled. I almost backed out. Then Aunt Paula offered to keep Lily in the kitchen with the younger cousins during the gathering. Before we left, Lily saw me put the USB into the folder. Is that Dad's voice? She asked. I froze. You don't have to listen to anything today, I told her. I know. She touched the edge of the folder. But if they say Daddy wanted them to have money, can you play it? I knelt in front of her. That is grown-up business. You do not have to defend Dad. Her eyes filled with tears, but she didn't cry. I just don't like when they talk about him like he left presents. I hugged her hard enough that she squeaked. At Aunt Paula's house, the living room smelled like coffee and paper plates. There were mismatched chairs pulled in from the dining room. Colin stood near the kitchen doorway, looking uncomfortable in that polite outsider way. He had believed Heather at first. I could tell by how careful he was with me, as if I might explode and ruin another weekend. Carol sat on the couch with a tissue in her hand, already prepared for her performance. Richard was in an armchair staring at the floor. Heather stood with her arms folded, her engagement ring catching light every time she shifted. A few cousins hovered around the kitchen island. Aunt Paula watched me with a tight mouth. Uncle Warren, who wasn't especially close to any of us but had known Daniel from holiday dinners, sat near the window with his arms crossed. Carol started before I even took off my coat. We all need to talk before this family breaks beyond repair. I set my folder on the coffee table. Then talk honestly. My mother dabbed her eyes. No tears came off on the tissue. Nancy has changed since the money arrived, she said to the room, not to me. I know grief does strange things to people. I know she is hurting. But she is treating her parents like strangers. I sat down slowly. You skipped the funeral. Don't show up for the check. The room went quiet. Heather scoffed. See? This is what I mean. You act like my engagement caused Daniel's death. No, I said. I act like you treated his death like bad timing. Colin looked at Heather. She looked away. Richard leaned forward. No one is asking for a check today. We only wanted a fair conversation. Your mother is worried you're making decisions from pain. My husband died. Pain is not suspicious. Carol's voice sharpened. And we lost him too. Uncle Warren made a sound under his breath. Carol ignored him. Marriage joins families. Daniel would be ashamed to see you withholding help when your sister is trying to build her future. I felt Lily before I saw her. She had left the kitchen and was standing beside my chair. In her hand was the USB. She must have taken it from the outside pocket of my folder when I set it down. She placed it on the coffee table and slid it toward the center. Mom says voices don't lie, she said. My heart cracked right down the middle. Carol inhaled sharply. Lily, sweetheart. I put my arm around my daughter's shoulders and pulled her close. No, do not start with her. Then I turned to Lily and kept my voice soft. Go help Colin in the kitchen, sweetheart. This is grown-up business. Colin stepped forward immediately. To his credit, he didn't argue. Come on, Lily. I think there are cookies in there. Lily looked at me once, then went with him. I waited until she was out of the room. Then I picked up the USB. My mother's face changed. The polished sadness slipped, and for the first time she looked afraid. Nancy, she said, do not make this uglier than it needs to be. You already did. I opened my laptop. Carol stood halfway. This is private family business. It stopped being private when you recruited the family to pressure me. Richard finally looked at me. Nancy, think carefully. I have. I connected the USB and opened the folder I had prepared. Sensitive account numbers were blacked out. Policy details were limited. Mr. Alden had reviewed what I planned to show. This was not revenge porn. It was not a public rant. It was my defense against a story they had built in my silence. You all heard their version, I said. Now you're going to hear what they said when they thought no one would repeat it. I started with Heather's text from the hospital night. Please don't tell people here yet. I know this is awful, but this is my engagement weekend. Aunt Paula put one hand over her mouth. Colin had come back to the doorway without Lily. He read it from where he stood, his face going still. He looked at Heather. You knew Daniel died before the brunch was over? Heather's cheeks flushed. It was complicated. No, I said. It was inconvenient. Then I showed my mother's funeral morning text. We love you, but today is already in motion for Heather. Please don't make everyone choose. Uncle Warren said, Jesus, Carol. My mother snapped. You don't understand what that weekend meant. Aunt Paula turned to her. Her husband's funeral, Carol. I moved to Richard's message. Don't turn today into a scene, Nancy. My father rubbed his forehead. I played the voicemail next. My mother's voice filled the living room, polished and sharp. Nancy, this silence is not healthy. We all lost Daniel. You are not the only person grieving. Money can make people forget where they came from. Carol reached toward the laptop. I moved it back. Don't, I said. She sank back like I had slapped her. Then I showed the spreadsheet. The room leaned in despite itself. Temporary family support. Heather wedding stability. Grandparent travel. Shared emotional loss. Uncle Warren stared at Richard. You missed the funeral, then brought a bill. Richard said nothing. Carol's voice rose. That is not what it was. I clicked the doorbell clip. The video showed my parents on my porch. My mother with the casserole. My father with the folder. The audio was clear enough. Carol's recorded voice said, we should ask before she moves anything around. Insurance can get complicated fast. Richard replied, just keep it gentle at first. No one in the room moved. I had one more thing. I opened Daniel's voice memo. For a second I almost stopped. Hearing him in that room felt too intimate. But then I thought of Lily in the hallway asking if Daddy wanted Grandma to have his money, and I pressed play. "Hey, Nance." His voice changed the room more than any screenshot could have. Even Heather looked startled. Daniel hadn't been a concept. He had been a man who fixed chairs at family barbecues and helped kids untangle fishing lines and made coffee too strong. "If you're hearing this, I hate that I'm not there to say it to your face." My throat closed, but I kept the laptop steady. "You and Lily come first. That is not negotiable. The insurance is for the house, for Lily. For whatever stability looks like when I can't help provide it myself. Your parents do not get a vote. Heather does not get a vote. Anyone who tries to make you feel guilty about that is proving why I wrote this down." Carol whispered. "Turn it off." I didn't. Daniel's voice continued. "Do not let anyone turn your kindness into a bill. Nancy and Lily are my family. No one else comes before them." When it ended, the silence was different. Not awkward. Heavy. Aunt Paula looked at my mother. "Carol, did you tell us Nancy wanted privacy, or did you hide what you did?" Carol's mouth opened. Nothing came out. I showed the last screenshot then. The accidental one Heather had sent me. "Let Nancy handle the service. We'll talk about the money once she's less raw. For now, keep the weekend clean." Aunt Paula stood up slowly. "You talked about money before the funeral?" Heather said. "Mom was just thinking ahead." Colin stared at her. "Heather." "What?" she snapped. "It was a horrible situation, but I'm allowed to have one good thing. My engagement weekend was planned for months." Colin's voice was quiet. "Her husband died. You think I don't know that? I think you asked her to keep quiet so people would keep smiling at you." Heather looked like he had betrayed her. My father finally spoke, but not to defend me. Not at first. He said, "Carol, why would you write that?" My mother whipped toward him. "Do not put this on me. You agreed we should wait until Nancy settled." Uncle Warren leaned back in his chair. "Richard, you don't get to look surprised now. Your text is right there." Richard's face went red. For years, my father had survived my mother's worst behavior by standing behind her and looking sad about it. That day, the sadness didn't protect him. His own words were on the screen. Carol turned back to me with tears finally forming. "You are humiliating your mother." I closed the laptop halfway. "You tried to turn my husband's death into a payout." I stopped pretending it was grief. "Nancy," she said, her voice shaking, "we are not strangers. We are your parents. Then you should have acted like it when I buried my husband." Heather's eyes narrowed. "So what, you're cutting us all off because we didn't handle one weekend perfectly?" "One weekend." I repeated. "You asked me to hide Daniel's death. Mom and Dad skipped his funeral. Then they brought a spreadsheet for his insurance. Then you all told relatives I got greedy when I refused to discuss money. That is not one weekend." Richard's voice was barely audible. "We made mistakes." "No," I said. "You made choices." I pulled a letter from the folder and placed it on the coffee table. "This is from Mr. Alden. All future questions about Daniel's assets go through his office. There will be no money for Heather's wedding, no grandparent travel fund, no temporary family support, no shared emotional loss payment. Lily's money stays protected. The house stays stable. That is what Daniel wanted." Carol began crying louder. "You would keep Lily from her grandparents over money?" I felt calmer than I had in weeks. "No. I will keep Lily from adults who use her father's death as leverage." Aunt Paula sat down hard. "Carol, you told me Nancy didn't want anyone at the service." My mother said. "She was overwhelmed." Aunt Paula's voice broke. "You lied to me." Uncle Warren looked at Richard. Missing the funeral was bad. Showing up for insurance was unforgivable. Colin walked out of the room. A minute later, I heard his low voice in the kitchen, gentle with Lily. I don't know what he said to her, but when she came back later, she had a cookie in one hand and didn't look scared. The gathering fell apart after that. Not dramatically. No one threw anything. Nobody fainted. It was worse for my mother because it was quiet. People stopped looking at her like she was the center of the family and started looking at her like she was a problem they had helped excuse. Heather followed Colin outside. Through the window I saw her talking fast, her hands moving. He kept shaking his head. Aunt Paula hugged me before I left. She smelled like coffee and vanilla hand lotion. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I believed your mother." "I know. I should have called you directly." "Yes," I said. "Not cruelly. Just honestly." She nodded and cried harder. On the drive home, Lily was quiet in the back seat. I glanced at her in the rearview mirror and saw Daniel's cap in her lap. "Are you okay?" I asked. She thought about it. "I don't want Grandma to say daddy things anymore." "She won't." "Can we put his caps on the shelf instead of the floor?" "Yeah, baby. We can." That night, we lined them up on the shelf in the living room. Not because it fixed anything. Because Lily wanted them where she could see them. The fallout wasn't instant in the dramatic way people expect from stories online. There was no courtroom scene where a judge slammed a gavel and called my parents greedy. There was no giant public cancellation. It was messier and more realistic. The family group chat went silent for almost 2 full days. Then Aunt Paula wrote, "Nancy, I am sorry. I was told a different version." Uncle Warren wrote, "Carol and Richard owe Nancy more than silence." One cousin sent me a private message saying she had wanted to attend Daniel's service but had been told I requested no visitors. Another said my mother had framed it as, "Nancy is fragile and wants distance." A third simply wrote, "I'm sorry we let her manage the information." Carol left the group chat for 6 hours, then came back with a message about how private pain should not be displayed for judgment. No one reacted with hearts. Heather posted nothing for a week. Then her engagement photos disappeared from the top of her page. I later heard from Aunt Paula that Colin had paused wedding planning. Heather called me after that. I didn't answer. She sent a text. "You made Colin think I'm some monster. Thanks for that." I forwarded it to Mr. Alden and didn't reply. She sent another. "I was under pressure too. Everyone was here for us. I couldn't just cancel everything because of something no one could change." I typed 3 replies and deleted all of them. The only one I sent was, "Do not contact me about Daniel's money or Lily. Use Mr. Alden for anything necessary." She responded with a string of messages I didn't read until the next morning. They all said basically the same thing. I had made her engagement feel like a crime. I had turned Colin against her. I had always resented her. I was using grief to punish everyone. For the first time in my life, I didn't defend myself to her. Mr. Alden sent a formal letter after my parents kept texting. It arrived by certified mail. He copied me on the email version. It said, "All future inquiries regarding Daniel's assets must be directed to this office. Nancy will not discuss insurance proceeds, estate documents, or protected funds through personal calls, texts, or in-person visits. Continued pressure may be documented as harassment." It was dry and boring and beautiful. I changed passwords. I removed my parents as emergency contacts at Lily's school. I added Daniel's friend's wife and Aunt Paula after Aunt Paula apologized properly and agreed to my boundaries. I gave the school a note that Carol and Richard were not to pick Lily up without my written permission. The office staff was kind. Too kind. The kind of kindness that tells you they have seen grandparents behave badly before. Carol tried to get around the letter by sending messages that sounded emotional instead of financial. "I miss my granddaughter. We need to move forward. Lily needs her grandparents. You are teaching her bitterness." I answered once. "Moving forward requires a real apology, no money talk, no rewriting Daniel, and no blaming Lily for adult choices. Until then, there is no direct contact." Carol replied, "I am sorry you feel this way. That was not an apology. It was punctuation. Richard asked to meet privately without my mother. That one hurt more than I expected. Some old part of me wanted to believe he might finally say, 'I should have come. I should have protected you. I should have told your mother no.' But secrecy was how our family system had survived. Private conversations. Side calls. Softened truths. People saying one thing in the kitchen and another in the group chat. I declined through Mr. Alden. Richard sent one message before I blocked his number. I never meant for it to go this far. I stared at that for a long time. That was the problem. He never meant for anything to go anywhere. He just let it. He let my mother decide, let Heather take, let me absorb, let Daniel's funeral pass without him. He let life happen to other people and called his own inaction peace. Heather eventually sent what I guess she considered an apology. I'm sorry if my engagement weekend made you feel unsupported. I was under a lot of pressure and didn't know what to do. I didn't accept it. Not because I needed her to crawl. Because the word still made my grief about her schedule. She was sorry about how I felt. She was sorry about pressure. She was not sorry she had asked me to keep Daniel's death quiet so her brunch could stay clean. Colin surprisingly reached out months later. He sent a message through Aunt Paula first, asking if it was okay to contact me once. I said yes. His message was short. Nancy, I'm sorry. I believed Heather when she said you were angry and shutting everyone out. Hearing Daniel's voice changed everything. I should have asked more questions before accepting their version. I hope you and Lily are as okay as possible. I replied. Thank you for saying that. I didn't ask about the wedding. Aunt Paula later told me it was still postponed. Carol blamed me, of course. She said I had poisoned Colin against the family. Uncle Warren apparently said, No, Carol, the messages did. That line made it around the family faster than any truth I had ever told. The money stayed exactly where Daniel wanted it. Some went toward keeping the house stable. Some went into Lily's protected fund. Some covered counseling bills and the ugly practical costs that come after someone dies. I didn't buy anything dramatic. I didn't fund revenge. I didn't use Daniel's insurance to prove a point. I used it to breathe. Grief didn't disappear when my parents lost control of the story. That part matters. Cutting off manipulative people does not make the bed less empty. It does not stop you from reaching for your phone to text your husband a dumb picture before remembering there is nowhere to send it. It does not make your child stop asking why some people get very old and her dad did not. But it made the house quieter in a way that helped. There were no more surprise visits with casseroles and spreadsheets. No more calls where my mother used the word family like a hook. No more pretending Heather's milestones were sacred, while my losses were scheduling issues. No more explaining myself to people committed to misunderstanding me because misunderstanding me got them closer to what they wanted. About 8 months after Daniel died, Carol sent a letter. Actual paper, addressed in her careful handwriting. I waited 2 days before opening it. She wrote that she missed Lily. She wrote that she was getting older. She wrote that families should not stay broken forever. She wrote that Daniel would want forgiveness. There it was again. Daniel's name in her mouth like a tool. I put the letter in the folder with everything else and did not respond. Lily stayed in counseling. Some weeks she talked. Some weeks she colored. Her counselor told me grief moves sideways in children. One day they ask a question that breaks your heart, and the next they are furious because their socks feel wrong. On the anniversary of Daniel's death, Lily asked if we could make pancakes for dinner because Dad always made breakfast food at illegal times. We did. I burned the first batch because Daniel had always been better at pancakes. Lily laughed for the first time that day when I scraped one into the trash and said, "This one is going to pancake jail." Later, she worked on a school memory project at the kitchen table. She wrote Daniel's name in blue marker because blue was his favorite color, then glued a small printed picture of him beside it. On the shelf behind her, his baseball cap sat in a neat row. I made coffee for myself. Just 1 cup. For months, making 1 cup had felt like betrayal. Daniel used to take his coffee too strong with a splash of milk. I still sometimes reached for his mug. That morning I didn't. I used mine, stood at the counter, and listened to Lily hum while she worked. My phone buzzed once. A message from an unknown number. It was Carol. "Please, Nancy. I want to see my granddaughter. I don't want to talk about money. I just want my family back." I read it, then looked at Lily. She was carefully drawing a crooked baseball cap in the corner of her project. I blocked the number. Not because I was trying to punish my mother forever. Not because I enjoyed being hard. I had spent my life being soft for people who mistook softness for permission. I had mistaken endurance for love, silence for loyalty, and being needed for being valued. Daniel saw that before I did. He left me paperwork, yes. He left me a voice memo. He left me beneficiary forms and a notarized statement. But more than that, he left me one clear instruction in a lifetime of messy family noise. You and Lily come first. So we did. Aunt Paula still visits sometimes. She doesn't bring up Carol unless I ask. Uncle Warren sends Lily birthday cards with terrible jokes inside. A few cousins apologized and rebuilt contacts slowly, without asking for access they hadn't earned. The people who only wanted me quiet stayed gone. Heather never sent a real apology. My parents never admitted the full truth without wrapping it in excuses. I stopped waiting for them to become the family I had needed at the funeral home doors. That day at Aunt Paula's house, when Lily slid the USB across the coffee table, people later said it was the moment everything changed. I understand why they say that. It was dramatic. It was clean. It was the kind of moment people remember. But for me, the real change happened earlier. It happened in my living room when Carol said Daniel would have wanted the whole family cared for, and I saw my daughter in the hallway believing for one awful second that her father had left behind a gift bag for the people who had abandoned us. That was when I stopped protecting adults from the consequences of their own words. I didn't cut them off because they missed the funeral. I cut them off because they showed me exactly what they came back for. If you liked it, don't forget to leave a comment and support the channel by subscribing. See you in the upcoming stories.